I think we are live. Hello, good day, everyone. Welcome to MaiaGrazing's live webinar today. My name is Shida. I'm the head of marketing here at MaiaGrazing. And today you'll be hearing from my awesome team member based in Minnesota called Annalise Walker on the topic called Cutting the Middleman, a RegenAg view on direct to consumer. So before I hand you over to Annalise, I would love to share a few things about her that I think you'll find quite interesting. So Annalise, aside from being a very busy regenerative farmer on Walker Farms, she is also my teammate, as I mentioned before. She's been with MaiaGrazing entrenched firmly into the customer success team for over 13 months. And within that time, she has had huge achievements, helping over 115 graziers, our customers, across 5 countries and 30 states in USA, helping them drive their regenerative dreams. In the 5 years that Annalise has been a regenerative farmer, she's worked with her family farm called Walker Farms, and you'll hear more from Annalise about that shortly. One last thing about Annalise that really strikes me is her thirst for knowledge. And as a result, she is really open to innovation. And I see the way that she passes on these experiences to our customers in MaiaGrazing. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Annalise. Enjoy. Annalise, over to you.
Thanks, Sheeta. Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm so excited that you're joining us today, and this is my first ever webinar, so please be kind. So today we're going to be talking about a couple of different things. First and foremost, we're going to be doing an online virtual tour of my farm, or of our family farm. Then we'll talk about our business model. So as a direct-to-consumer farm, what does that look like? How do we serve our community? And what is our role and our goal? Last but not least, we're going to talk about data-driven grazing, how we have conversations surrounding our grazing using data and then making plans for consequent years. And then at the very end, we're going to do a little bit of a Q&A. So if there's anything in there that, that you have any questions about, or you want me to sort of like talk about a little bit deeper, feel free to throw those questions into the Q&A box in Zoom, and we'll touch on those at the very end. So without further ado, we're first going to talk a little bit about Walker Farms as a farm. So Walker Farms is my family farm. So I work alongside my husband and his family in Princeton, Minnesota. We manage roughly 200 acres. I lovingly call myself an import, so I'm not originally from here. I am joined with, or by, my sister-in-law, Becky. So from left to right in the photo, you'll see my sister-in-law, Becky, brother-in-law, Andy, mother-in-law, Tammy, father-in-law, Big George, and then my husband, Big George. And then, of course, we have our 2 quality control officers, Little Cohen and Baby Daphne. So yeah, so that's our team. Our mission is to farm in a way that restores the soils through rotational grazing by reestablishing pastures and mimicking nature in our management to draw down carbon and fight climate change. Our mission really drives a lot about how we talk about our business, how we approach how we do business on the day-to-day, and how we move forward from year to year and connect with our customers. So next, we're going to do a really quick virtual tour. Hi everyone, my name is Annalise Walker. I'm from Walker Farms and also MaiaGrazing support. It's my pleasure to bring you on this virtual farm tour of my farm here in central Minnesota. We are a regenerative farm that focuses on raising grass-fed beef, grass-finished lamb, and pastured pork and poultry. All of our products are direct to consumer, and we really emphasize doing a lot of customer education, talking about climate change and soil health, and educating people on the products that we're providing them so that they sort of understand from the soil to the plate everything that went into it and what it looks like to be a farmer on the everyday farm here in Minnesota. One thing to mention is that all of the property that we currently manage and graze is all rented. A lot of it was either slated for development or it had been conventionally cropped, like corn on corn for 20 years. So some of it is, so all of it we're working on amending through proper grazing management, rotational grazing, adding animals and things like that, and then also using a diverse pasture mix. So behind me you'll see our grass-finished lamb. The reason that we brought on grass-finished lamb this year was because we tend to have a lot of really woody type weeds, so very fibrous weeds that some of our other species won't eat, like our chickens and our beef. And so we decided to bring on sheep that are more browse type animals so that they will take care of some of those noxious weeds that we don't necessarily want to have in the pasture, have a tendency to overgrow. So making sure that they are filling their ecologic niche within our small ecosystem so that we can really optimize our pastures. So behind me you'll see our grass-fed beef. A lot of the beef that we have on farm we actually purchase in at the beginning of our growing season, and then we butcher them at the end of the growing season and put them in the freezer. We do have a small group of cow-calf pairs, or a small, very small cow-calf enterprise. Our numbers throughout the year tend to fluctuate, so again we really do try to match the largest amount of demand for during our green dates, and then reduce the animals that we carry over the winter, because our winters are so harsh here. We are required to feed hay, so that's something that we need to budget for at the beginning of the year and through the remainder of not only the growing season, but also how much are we going to need hay wise to get us through some of the darkest, longest nights of our winters. So So behind me you can see these are our pastured pigs. This is where we finish them out. These pastures are rotationally grazed. We also do offer them ad libitum feed, so supplemental feed as well. Pigs are a little bit different in that they're omnivores. They're simple stomached like us people. They get a supplemental non-GMO antibiotic free feed that we locally source from farms around our area. These guys are not rotated as heavily, so all of our species, so our cows and our chickens and everything, are typically moved every 24 hours. Our pigs are moved every month or so, just depending on what they're doing to the pasture and how they're really utilizing it. So behind me you'll see these are actually our farrowing huts. We farrow all of our piglets here in these pens to keep them protected. Behind the camera there's actually a pretty decent sized swamp, and then we also have a state forest behind us on the southern part of this property. So it's really critical that we keep them contained for this portion of their life to keep both mom and baby safe. So let's take a look inside. We actually just had some piglets, so you'll get to see that as well. So this is the inside of one of our farrowing huts. This is one of our new moms and 5 new babies. There's mom in the back there. So these huts are enclosed on they only have one way out, but they're very well ventilated. That corner where you see the plywood, that's where we have the heat lamp. So, hi Mom. So behind me you will see these are our 2 big egg mobiles, or big chicken tractors. These particular trailers actually house our laying flock. Between the 2 trailers we have roughly 500 birds. They are all technically a conventional breed, but we have them on pasture all year round. During our winters we put them in high tunnels so they have the passive heat from the sun, and then they have a little bit of extra insulation from a compost bedding pack to keep their legs nice and warm during the coolest months. So these are the high tunnels that we keep our meat birds in. They are moved every 24 hours by one length of the hoop. They are on pasture for the entirety of their life except for the first 2 weeks that they spend in the brooder. And last but not least, this is my office. This is where I spend the majority of my time when I'm working on things for Maia or for our own farm here in Minnesota. If you have any questions about anything that you saw today, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. You can get me on Slack or you can shoot me by email.
Either way, just let me know. Thanks.
All right, so that was just a quick video, and this video was originally produced for our whole team for a company update. So it was super fun to be able to share our little like corner of the world. It is quite small as compared to many of the people that I help out here with Maia. So yeah, so let's get rolling. One of the things that so again, to emphasize, we actually, all of the land that we manage was either slated for development. So all of the topsoil would have been ripped off, and then it was like resculpted and like moved so that there was like 200-year flooding zones. So this is one such property on the left. You'll see in 2018, that was the first year that we ever rotationally grazed cattle on it. We experienced a lot of really intense grass thatching. We had some issues with like moss on the actual soil surface. There was a high density of like vascular plants. So you're talking like ragweeds and mare's tail. So there's a great mullein, I think it's called hound's tongue in some corners of the country. And pigweed. So it was just really degraded. So after 2 years, on the right-hand side, you'll see that the plant density is a lot more intense than on the left-hand side, even though we were a little bit lower on our rolling rainfall. So we've been really happy with the results of how of implementing management intensive grazing, and how it's really been able to help us boost productivity in the last just 2 years. So that's been really, really great to see. The other part of our business obviously is serving our farm, or our farm fans. So again, we are a direct to consumer farm. Our customers are our local community members, they're our neighbors, they're our neighbors' neighbors. They all, so we travel anywhere between like 150 miles to 200 miles in one route. We deliver environmentally conscious food products to these people. So it's really sort of a holistic approach from the soil all the way to your plate, like what all goes into this food and how is it, how is it treated all the way through. So what all we offer, so above and beyond like having multiple species and a wide variety of protein products, and it's also food transparency. People really want to know how their animals are being produced. They want to know how they're treated. They want to know like what their life is like on the day-to-day. And so sharing that story and sharing that level of transparency with people is incredibly important, especially in this time when people are trusting everyone else less and less. And so becoming the commander of your own story and really stepping into that position of empowerment, self-empowerment, and agricultural empowerment to be able to talk about what you do, why you do it, and how you do it, so that you can feel supported in what you do by a greater population outside of the ag community. The other flip side of that coin is also allowing consumers to feel more involved, and then also empowered as well in making good decisions for their families, right? So if they know where that food is coming from and how it's being produced, perhaps they will feel just more connected to their food and what they're putting on their table. Our role and our goal overall is to be storytellers, to be educators, and to be advocates for regenerative ag in our community and for our community. So all of our inputs we try to source as locally as physically possible. For every dollar that you spend in your local community with a small business, I think it's like 80% more of that profit margin will stay in your local community than if you purchase any of your inputs from a bigger company like a corporatized entity. So part of our mission is really to not only uplift regenerative ag, but also be part of uplifting our small local community, because we need rural communities, especially right now. So a lot of our grazing goals are actually our community goals. So our community and our customers are very much a part of who we are. The first major goal that we're going to talk about is restoring ecosystems. Our role as regenerative farmers is to wake up the soil through multi-species rotational grazing. We really want to see, an increase in native plant life and biodiversity. One of the things to talk about, and like one of the things that we really watch is ecosystem succession. So when we first start managing a lot of these properties, they're anywhere from like having exposed rocks and lichens and mosses and annual weeds to like they're just dead, right? There's nothing there, so it's pretty rough. Our goal is to get them more to the perennial weeds and grasses. We actually are located in an oak savanna, so typically we're trying, if we can get enough of the native species, the native grasses going, they do actually choke out some of the shrubs and things that that our state and our population tends to look at as like an invasive species. We also watch other trophic levels. So insofar as like symbiotic relationships, we're looking for birds that help suppress like fly issues. We're looking at fungi that are going to help building back our soils, and then also the soil microbiota itself. There's also, the next trophic level. So you have your different types of bugs. So I'm looking for my bug diversity. My husband literally did a happy dance the first time we saw a dung beetle here. It was really exciting. We have a lot more monarch butterfly habitat than we had 2 years ago. So it's just those types of things that we watch. The next part is looking at actual wildlife that we can live side by side with. So frogs and turkeys and deer are like probably the 3 most popular in our particular area. We also do have like endangered species like sandhill cranes and so forth that we keep an eye on, but they don't really like cows, so they're not usually in our yards. And then the last part, so unfortunately, one of the great things about reestablishing habitat is that all of the habitat comes with. So we also do have a fairly large amount of predation issues with like eagles and coyotes, badgers, mink. We've had some other issues too, but those are like the major ones. So that's also something that's sort of the other flip side of the coin in doing your job, doing it well. So yeah. The next goal for our farm is to reestablish pastures. So again, if we can increase that biodiversity and if we can increase that plant population and reinvigorate our soils, our pastures will start producing more. We're in a region of the country that has a pretty high level of regional rainfall or annual rainfall. So we're pretty blessed with pretty high ponds of dry matter content in our pastures on an annual basis. Something to understand about our particular context, which is obviously going to be different from anybody else's, it's going to be more about, we're going to be producing more in our green days than we will in our off season, but because of our snow levels, we are required to feed hay for certain periods of time. So if we can be a little bit more intentional about where we feed and how we feed our bales, then we can potentially increase our plant population the following year. From the soil up, right, next level, we're looking at producing healthy food products. So there have been studies that have shown that pasture-raised and grass-fed animal products have been shown to have higher nutrient densities as compared to their CAFO-raised counterparts. There's lots of really great data out there showing that this is that it's a nutritionally superior product. We have not actually done any like testing to see if our poultry is better than like Tyson or whatever, but I can tell you it tastes better. So that's something to consider when, if you're thinking about sowing in a direct to consumer portion of your market. I have to say that poultry is probably one of the easier ones to get into as compared to other types of enterprises. But it would, it's something to consider. And then last but not least, food transparency and like community trust is absolutely the biggest thing that we do. I believe it is our job as people involved in agriculture to drive the conversation around agriculture. I think that cutting out the middleman, so not allowing some of these bigger brands and companies to take over our dialogues and take over our stories and take over our way of life, I don't think that's right. And so being able to build those transparent, those levels of transparency and build those relationships with your consumers and sort of, again, cutting out that middleman, not only does it allow you to capture more of your profit margin and potentially be more profitable, but it also allows you to have a greater support network, which again, I think is so incredibly important for people in ag. So yeah. So insofar as like building relationships, this type of a picture is not uncommon on our farm. So one of our wonderful customers after Thanksgiving sent us this picture of his 2 turkeys that he had to make sure were absolutely well taken care of and made it home safely to his Thanksgiving table. So these are 2 22-pound turkeys that went home Thanksgiving week. So another word on trust. So why does trust matter? More than 70% of consumers link purchase considerations to trust in corporations in the supply chain or like in their environmental impact. We as agricultural people, like people who are involved in agriculture, are 100% involved in that supply chain. We're 100% involved in the environmental impacts. We're 100% involved in the values that go behind all of the things that we do and why we produce the way we produce. And people don't believe that we're putting like our customers ahead of our profits. So again, taking control of your story, making sure that people understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, so that they feel more connected to you and to your food. So one of the biggest ways that we build community trust is through the use and leverage of social media. Social media is first and foremost a place to hold conversations and build relationships. It's not necessarily a place to do hard sells, but I can tell you that through building conversations, we have seen an increase in sales. This is an example of one of our most popular posts, and it's pretty much like, ask the question, do you know your farmer? What do we produce? What do we do? What is our mission? Who buys from us? And then how can you buy? It's pretty straightforward. We always have a lot of traction with things like this. And so it's a really crucial part of what we do in our business and how we facilitate those types of online conversations. Another part of what we do is consumer education. So that was one thing that I had mentioned in that farm tour video. This is an example of a post that that's talking about what we're doing and sort of like celebrating a success. So this particular frog, we had not seen frogs in this pasture like ever. This is the first time that we ever had. It's the second year that we've rotationally grazed through this particular pasture. So allowing our customers to celebrate alongside us when we see some of these ecosystem deliverables come through for us. It's really just sort of a magical experience and a really great way for, again, our customers to get connected to what we do and why we do it. Last but not least, the thing about social media and like quality content on social media is building the humanness back into how you talk about like your operation. Like, so for instance, this particular post, I am talking about my own regenerative journey. So while regenerative is, yes, all about soil health, plant health, ecosystem health, restoring your nutrient cycles, all that kind of a thing, it's also about human health. I was diagnosed with celiac disease in 2016. I played hospital hopscotch for like 6 months before I actually received a diagnosis. During that time period, following that time period, I readjusted all of how I ate, what I did, how I treated my body. And it took me about a year to come back from it. Even so, this is a picture of me in 2017, a year later. It's taken the same month, and I was still incredibly ill. It takes a long time to restore an actual ecosystem, and it also takes a long time to restore human health. So I take what we do on our farm incredibly seriously, because I know what it is like to lose it all and have nothing and be bedbound and 6 migraines a week. It's not fun. Pardon me. And a lot of our customers are very much the similar way. I've had customers come to me saying that they've had rheumatoid arthritis and changing their diet changed their life. Same with pre-diabetic, same, you know, it's really amazing, and it's very healing. And I really truly believe that that farmers, again, agrarians, ranchers, farmers, agrarians, have the power to affect this type of change in our society. So our management in what we do and why we do it and how we do it creates a ripple effect that goes through every single stratus of our entire society at a world scale. And that's not something to be taken lightly, and it should be highly respected. So measuring success, I'm a nerd. I love data, I love numbers. I like to know that I'm being successful. So therefore I need a stick with which I can measure things. So that's originally why I started sort of following MaiaGrazing. That's why I stalked them down and, and tried to get a job with them. So we use Maia to do all of our land management information. So I'm tracking how much are we producing, and then also forecasting out what can we carry next year based on different rainfall scenarios. Again, we're pretty lucky. We actually get a very large and consistent amount of rainfall every single year. I know that's not a luxury that many of you experience, but it does help us drive our decisions and what we're doing, and understanding what, like, by stacking our enterprises and filling all those different ecosystem niches with the different species, we can actually utilize our land a lot more efficiently than if we had a single species operation. I also am really terrible at plant identification. It's just really not my strong suit. So I use Seek by iNaturalist for to help me identify plants out in the pasture. It's also a really good source of information for me to share on social media with our customers, because they're learning right alongside us most of the time. So it's a fun app, it's a helpful app, and I highly recommend it. So again, if you do not measure it, how do you know that your efforts are successful? So every support person at MaiaGrazing sort of has their own greatest hits list, like where they spend the majority of their time. Today I'll be showing you some of the different corners of Maia that I love the most. And so as a small direct-to-consumer farm, we do approach things, I don't want to say significantly differently, but a little bit differently. So here you're going to see that our total grazing area is 216 acres. If we actually pop into my analytics dashboard, we'll be able to see that main stock days per acre per inch of rainfall. The farm average gives me an idea of where I'm at as compared to, like, just from a top-down property level, view. It's really important for me to make sure that I'm not overdoing it and I'm not taking too much from our property, because again, we rent all of the properties that we manage. So it's not just on us, like we also have to report to someone else. So above and beyond, we can also sort this by the different groups. So this group 1 is a set of pastures that it had been conventionally row cropped, corn on corn for several years. Last year we harvested hay off of it and like triticale for the first time. And then this year was the first year that we actually had cattle on it. We did end up overgrazing by a tad because there's just not a lot of plant density there. So we ended up feeding a little bit of hay. We're now in that process of feeding hay, and so through forecasting, by letting those pastures actually rest from like November here all the way over, you can see we'll be, just in time for our grain dates. We'll be back to a decent level so that we don't overly impact our pastures based on my forecast. The other area that I spend a lot of time on is actually in the land analytics area. So when I'm creating my graze plans, there's two major figures that I look for. One of them is what can I reasonably do for cumulative yield? So at my for my annual grass budget, for what can I produce on an annual basis, and then throw all of my herds into it to see if I can carry them. I would use my cumulative animal days per acre. We don't necessarily actually use the graze planning, the like true graze plan function of Maia, because we subdivide our pastures so small that they'll be in that pasture for 40 to 60 days before committing to the next move. So so we use it a lot for the forecasting and budgeting side of things, and not necessarily committing to graze plans. The last portion that I want to talk about is actually the forecasting function. I do spend a lot of time playing in here. I find it really helpful to run different like rainfall scenarios. So this particular forecast is if we just had our cattle herd running, and we'll see if giving me a little bit of guff here. So we'll switch to this. So this is sort of what a forecast would look like. So there's three different types of forecasts within MaiaGrazing. We have the rainfall forecast, the stocking rate forecast, and then the combined forecast. So I typically use the combined forecast because it gives me access to editing both the rainfall and the stocking rate. It does allow me a little bit more play space. So if I assume that the spigots are going to turn off in June, what's that going to do to my overall carrying capacity throughout the summer? And do we need to think about either adding additional rental properties or implementing some sort of fail grazing earlier on in the season, which is not as, we don't want to do that. It's expensive. So so using that forecasting, you can do it at both the pasture group level and at the property level. So so that's something to think about. So flying right along, my role as a MaiaGrazing support staff is mostly to help you, guide you through MaiaGrazing, how to use MaiaGrazing within your individualized context. I fully understand that the majority of the people that I help on the day-to-day have a completely different operation to mine. We are the local lunatic farmers. We're pretty weird as compared to most people. So, being able to have access to so many different people in so many different contexts, it's really fun to be able to hear about your operations and then help you apply these tools to your particular business structure. I also do a lot with helping with data fixes. So if something happens, something gets screwed up, we're here to catch you when you fall. That's our job, and we love doing it. And the last thing too is if you get stuck and you need access to educational resources, I'm always more than happy to send you anything that I have access to or connect you with professionals in your area. I'm a huge fan of the NRCS. They have some really great funding opportunities, but they also have good educational opportunities here in the United States. We also have service providers who can help you out if you need individual consultation, and that's often covered by some NRCS funds. So my biggest advice is lean in, embrace the journey, and just keep showing up and experimenting. I mean, if I don't try 2 crazy things every day, it would be a very boring life. We're super blessed here with our crazy tiny farm, but you know, I think especially in the world of grazing, in the world of Maia, in the world of regenerative, you can never, ever, ever have too much experimentation. So with that, I mean, I've hit on everything that I was planning on hitting on. I'm gonna head over this little Q&A thing. Let's see here. So I got 4 in the chat. So yeah. One of the questions, can I access the seminar at a later date? Oh, yep, and she'd already answered it. Definitely, yes, we will have that available to you. Does anybody else have any questions? So what do the next 5 years look like for our farm? That's a great question. So we are going to be implementing, so we're hoping to double our stocking density and also increase the mobile infrastructure so that we can get our pigs out on pasture more often, or out on different pastures more readily, I should say. We also want to increase our carrying capacity and produce more animal products so that we can start selling into a greater area. We really wanted to start shipping this year, but due to COVID, our local community demand really increased. It like tripled from what we had previously been experiencing. So we ended up soft launching it, but we're not actively advertising that portion of our particular operation. So beyond word of mouth, do you use any systems or platforms to help grow our direct to customers? Yeah, so the different platforms that we currently manage or are on is, so we are on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we have a small YouTube channel, though it's not actually leveraged very heavily, and then we also have our website. One thing to note about sort of just consumer behavior as a whole, in 2020, we saw, or like marketing saw an increase in like 40% of people using social media as an actual search engine. So for looking for products, and that was one of the things that we saw, especially with like marketplace becoming a thing. Of course, it's not legal to sell, or like it's against their community rules to sell animal products on marketplace, but within Facebook in particular, we've had a lot of success going into region-specific Facebook groups. So the Farm Direct Facebook group here in Minnesota is really healthy and really robust. If you have local Facebook groups, I definitely encourage you to join them and watch them. Not all of them are built equally. Or curated equally. So proceed with caution, but it's definitely something to consider. The last thing that we do is we actually actively seek out opportunities to do PR in our local area. So we have relationships with our local co-ops, and also if there are like-minded organizations, so we have one that's called Minnesota Grown. We also have sought out doing articles with them, or like participating in local newsletters and things like that, and that's also been pretty successful. So those are the major ones, and then yeah, those are the major ones. So can MaiaGrazing help me figure out the best rotation for our farms? 2021 is going to be our first shot, and I don't know where to start. Fantastic. Yeah, so that's definitely something that we can work with you on. The first things first is going to be getting your infrastructure into MaiaGrazing. So understanding how many acres you have, and then if you have production information that's like really specific to your property, we can put that in and start playing with some graze plans and doing some grass budgeting and playing with a little bit more of like that carrying capacity in your particular area. If you don't have that information available, I can help you find an NRCS agent to glean that information and sort of either connect with a local service provider or get some like sort of pinch hit data points to play with, so that you feel like you have a little bit of ground to start with. So what type of seeds are we no-till drilling into our fields? And So to start with that, so we actually have a pretty diverse population of like clovers and like hairy vetch that they were either on purposely planted prior to us taking it or prior to us renting the property, or it's just sort of in the latent seed bed. We started no-till drilling in a lot of like winter rye, daikon radishes to help with some of that compacted soil on the top. There's some, I think we did some like bird's foot trefoil and some other ones. I'll be honest, my husband drives a lot of that side of things, and so I take a lot of the pictures and do a lot of the digital marketing side of things. How well does MaiaGrazing work with a seasonal grazing dairy? Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it would really depend a little bit more on your, well, it's definitely, if you are rotational grazing, I've helped 2 or 3 different dairy farms get onboarded with MaiaGrazing and to implement that rotational grazing using Maia. It does work with that, and so that you can budget for that, I would definitely make sure that you have your nutrition sort of figured out and how much you're going to need for your herd, so that we can really dial in your demand as well as what your properties can produce, especially if you are seasonal or if you're in a really harsh climate. So that I guess, like, not to ring my own bell, but like that's one of the benefits of MaiaGrazing is like it is our job to help you like work with a program and make sure that it's giving you what you need, and that what you're putting in is also accurate, so that everything sort of flows and works and you can really make educated decisions, especially if you start to hit a drought and you need to start making some planning for either additional feeding or to destock. So sorry, just working my way through it. So what weight do you typically kill or slaughter beef cattle at? So they typically, hanging weight is anywhere between I would say low 700s to maybe 800 hanging weight. I would say they're probably smaller, but they're also smaller. They're a smaller frame species or breed, I would say. So something to think about. So how can I find individual farmers to run their produce on the same property? That is a fantastic question. Yeah. So there's a lot of really great, again, I personally would default to going to the Facebook groups, looking at your local Facebook groups. Otherwise, you could just post about it to your social media. If you don't have social media, you can probably make a flyer and hang it in your local co-op. There are always kids and like young adults, maybe even older adults, who are interested in growing veggies and sort of stacking those enterprises on your particular property so that you can rent out a piece of land that's either not readily accessible or is just not appropriate for livestock because of pugging or it's too low or whatever. So there's lots of hyper local opportunities there. As a person with a brown thumb, that like I don't necessarily kill my garden, but I also don't necessarily make it thrive. I can definitely see the benefit to having someone else do produce on your property. So another question, are you selling halves, wholes, or by the piece? So we do both. I'll show you my walk-in freezer because that actually is a pretty good representation of sort of what our life looks like. So typically, so on this side, this is where this is our walk-in cooler. We can store probably 1,000 or so pounds worth of meat in here, depending on cuts. We do whole chickens and cuts, and then everything else is either sold by the cuts. One of the best ways that we've probably sold, especially our pastured poultry, if you're trying to get rid of less desirable cuts, is to put it as part of a variety pack. So within our variety pack, one of the hardest things that we have to sell is our chicken drummies, or like the actual drumstick. But people always want breasts. So if you put in like 2 packs of breasts and 2 packs of drummies and some other cuts with like a recipe book, people will buy that because people don't really know how to cook. So that's something to definitely think about. Halves, wholes, and quarters definitely have a really great niche because you can bring those animals to a custom exempt butcher, and you wouldn't have to pay for like a USDA certification or whatever your local government entity is. So again, like depending on your context, like if you don't have ready access to a like certification slaughter facility, selling them by the quarters and wholes and that kind of a thing is definitely a really great route to choose. So let's see. So how do you manage selling beef direct to consumer given the large amount of meat per animal? So we haven't really had an issue with the amount of yield that we get from our animals. If anything, we have a problem keeping it in stock. We butchered some beef in like August, and we were sold out. We had 2 go in August. We were sold out of beef by end of September, and then we had 2 more beef going in October. And we're hanging on to like 4 T-bone steaks. So in this particular time and season that we're in right now, demand has been really great. But there's definitely ways that you can do things a little bit differently, like I talked about with the drummy. So if you have a cut that's hard to move, put it with some more desirable cuts in a fixed priced package or a variety pack, so that you can sort of increase your likelihood of getting rid of some of those less desirable cuts. So I think one of the most universal questions that I get is the undercrown pig huts and then also the mobile chicken tractors. I did want to do sort of a little bit of a shout out to my brother-in-law because he's sort of the brains behind a lot of our ingenious different animal containment systems here on the farm. So this is a picture of one of our mobile chicken pens. So this particular pen can hold about 250 birds is its capacity. And the red bell waters is how we provide water to them. And then these feeders right here, they're made out of plywood, and we give them a limited amount of feed every single day. So of note, studies have shown that chickens that are on limited feed but also raised on pasture will actually have a higher conversion rate and will utilize the pasture more readily if you limit their feed to only a portion of their actual, like what their ration typically would be. They do tend to perform on pastures really well if they have like clovers in them. But honestly, the amount of nitrogen, like natural nitrogen that they put into our pastures and really helps us just like overall increase our pasture health tenfold. So really great symbiotic relationship right there. And I highly recommend it if you have areas that are dead or need sort of a boost of micro life. So there's that. And then, so this is the frame of that. If you're into those types of, if you're, interested in checking that out. I can also send out some other pictures after the webinar if you're interested. So. All right, well, everyone, let me see here, I just gotta switch here. All right, so it's time to wrap up. If you have any questions about our farm, I highly recommend that you shoot over to our website, walkerfarmsmn.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram. You can also go to my personal website, annalisawalker.com. And then we've also done 2 different interviews with the Working Cows podcast. Clay Conray does a fantastic job. So if you're ever looking for some professional development and you're a podcaster addict like me, he's a really great resource for you. And last but not least, if you have any questions about MaiaGrazing, I highly recommend you reach out to our amazing sales team. They are just all gems and saints and angels all wrapped into one, and they can give you a really high and tight tour of what MaiaGrazing can do for you, specifically to your particular, like tailor it to your specific business. If you have any questions, you can also reach out to me via email as well, and I will do my absolute best to help you out. Thanks.